Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you very much indeed. Fantastic Commonwealth Games video to bring back some memories to you. Welcome to you all to the 21st State of the City Economy Conference. Good morning, Council Leader. Good morning, Cabinet Secretary. Great to have you here with us. Thank you very much to everyone who's joining us today. I'm very honoured to be here once again to moderate the event for you. I'll shortly introduce Councillor Susan Aiken, the leader of the City of Glasgow, to give the first of 3 keynote speeches. That will be followed by a panel discussion. During the panel discussion in particular, we're going to step up our digital activities this year, and I'm going to introduce to you the Slido program that we're going to use. We're asking you to connect to Slido via the internet. You could use your 4G connection or the Wi-Fi system that's available in the hotel, but I'm reliably informed that 4G might well work better. As you can see, task 1 is to open www.sly.do. Please do this now because we're going to test the program in a moment. Then when you go to Slido, you have to enter the event code, which is hashtag SOCE 2018, State of the City Economy 2018. It's written wrong. SOC 80, 80. No, 18. Oh, I see. It's SOCE 18, not 2018. Excuse me, it's been written wrong on the slide. So SOCE 18. Hands up people who are already in, if you've got in. Well done, you lot. Everybody else catch up, please. Never ask a group of adults to do something live on stage. So, how many people are in now? Okay, that's about 1/3 of the room are in. Please keep going because we want you to participate. We're going to use this system both to ask you some questions and to poll your opinions, but secondly also to ask you to, or to invite you to ask questions and also to prioritize or like questions that are asked by other people so that we know which of the many questions that have been submitted are of most interest to most people in the room. That's the whole idea of this. How many people are now in to the Slido system and SOCE 18? Okay, that's pretty good. Let's get going then. We'd like to invite you firstly to do a poll. Can we see the poll on the screen, please? We're going to test this polling system. So we're asking you first, how did you get here today? What mode of transport did you use? Was it train, car, walk, bus, or cycle? So you can see 142 people have already voted. Let's take another 15 seconds and see how many of you can vote. Let's try to get over 250 votes. Please tell us how you got here this morning. You can see why it's called Slido, yeah? That the votes are sliding around as you contribute to them. So far, 51% of you came by train, 27% by car. Only 2% cycling today. I guess it would have been slightly more if we had this in the middle of June. But let's keep the votes going, please, for a few more seconds. We'll try to get to 250, which seems to me like a good number for a room of this size. 52% still on the train. 28% on the car. Please keep voting. Okay, we'll settle for 230 votes and we'll cut it off there. Okay, there's our 230. Let's pause that now. Just say congratulations to you. 52% of you came by train. 27% I think by car. Obviously, the issue of regional connectivity and the transport system is one of the questions that's been raised. We'll come back to later. And of course, the Connectivity Commission is actively working on these things. Let's go to our second poll, if we may. Now, this is the question on the lips or the minds of the nation. Can we see the second poll, please? Okay, now it's not this one. Those are the questions. We'd like to see the second poll, if we may. Second poll. Okay, as of today, do you think the most likely outcome of the current Brexit process is? 1, this is not what you'd like to see, it's what you think will happen. Will it be a negotiated deal? Will it be a hard Brexit, or will it be Remain? Which do you think is the most likely outcome of the Brexit process as it currently stands, as you see it today? Many of the questions that you've been submitting to us are about the implications of Brexit, and of course we'll be asking the Cabinet Secretary and others to address those shortly. But let's just see what you think is most likely. So 61% of you think the negotiated deal is the most likely outcome as we speak. 28% think it's Remain. 11% think it's hard Brexit. Very interesting. Let's have a few more votes there if we may. And I guess, of course, the question is what kind of negotiated deal? Is it the deal that Mrs. May is currently putting before Parliament, or is it another negotiated deal? That's an interesting thing to conjure with. Okay, let's pause that one there then. So 62% of you think a negotiated deal, and we'll come back to Brexit shortly. So as I said before, 3 keynote speakers, a panel discussion. You ask the questions, you prioritize the questions. Can we just look again at the existing questions that have been submitted? Could we see those on the screen, please? Just waiting for them. So we're into Slido. We're looking not at polls, but at questions here. Can we have that on screen? Not sure if we can. No? I have to do it. I think that's my friend Kevin Rush is going to do that. Okay, well, let me explain what you'll see when you go into the questions section. You'll see you've already submitted 100 questions. Thank you very much for the 100 questions that you've submitted. Some of them were repetitive of each other, and we distilled them down to 20. We're inviting you to prioritize the questions that you think are most important, and if the question that you think is important is not there, add a question. And then other people will be able to prioritize that as well. When we get to our panel discussion, we'll then go through the questions in the order of priority that you have given them. So this is a way of ensuring that we're really tackling the questions that you think are important. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, enough of the admin. Let's go to our first keynote speaker this morning, and it's a great pleasure to welcome to the stage, whoops, we'll start that again. We're a great pleasure to welcome to the stage our host, the leader of the City of Glasgow, Councillor Susan Aitken.
Thanks very much, Greg. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning at the 2018 State of the City Economy Conference. This is actually a coming-of-age year for this event, and it was first staged in 1997, 21 years ago. And Glasgow then, of course, was emerging from a turbulent chapter in our history. The post-war years had consigned to the past our proud and global reputation for heavy industry. And we know the story that followed. Deindustrialisation combined with urban depopulation left deep and toxic scars to fester on the city's landscape, and generational unemployment, detachment and despair to take hold in the communities that were left behind. But even in its darkest days, Glasgow could always muster and display a remarkable capacity for resilience. And from the green shoots of 1998's Garden Festival, the Year of Culture 2 years later, and the Year of Architecture and Design later in the 90s, these were milestones on a path to the recovery where we find ourselves today. A Glasgow with a vibrant, diverse, growing and international city economy, a world leader in key sectors like life sciences, quantum and space technology, creative industries, to name just a few, and a global reputation for hosting international sporting and cultural events. And when I stood here last year, I spoke of the city's need to be Brexit ready. And incredibly, with just over 100 days to go, as our poll just showed us, we don't know exactly what it is we need to be ready for. But we do know that it's crucial that Glasgow is able to rise above the oncoming shocks, and that we remain in control of resilience and growth. able to promote levels of innovation, investment, fair work and skills for all of our citizens, enabling and working in collaboration to secure our collective aims. Now, that's all easier said than done, and there aren't signs right now of the UK government making it any easier for us. But at last year's event, I announced my intention to commission a report into the potential impact of Brexit on the city economy. And later in today's programme, Professor Graham Roy of the Fraser of Allender Institute will speak in more detail about the findings. But if I were to pick one headline out of that report, it is that the city economy will face significant headwinds for the long term because of Brexit. And I meet regularly with businesses large and small, and what I hear from them time and again is deep concern about the impact Brexit in any form, but especially in a form that takes us out of the single market and customs union, will have on a city economy that has not only recovered from, but in so many ways transcended the ravages of the past. Does Brexit risk us losing so much of the progress that Glasgow has made? As the clock ticks down to March, real businesses, real employers, real workers and real public service providers like Glasgow City Council are still in limbo. But for us in the Council, wait and see could never be an option. And so the city has acted where we were able to. And this year, the Council and the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce jointly commissioned today's chair, Professor Greg Clark, to assess Glasgow's business performance, assets and climate in relation to our UK, European and global competitor cities. And those of you who have been regular tenders at the State of the City Economy Conference may be surprised to know that Greg doesn't just sit around waiting all year for the invitation to come back and chair. He does have a day job and is one of the world's leading urbanists and an advisor to cities globally. So he was the perfect person for us to choose to deliver that report. And the headline figures are encouraging. Our overall visibility is improving and our position across all global city metrics has improved by 21% since 2015. Among all medium-sized peer cities, Glasgow currently ranks 32nd for overall performance. And this complements the great strides that we know we've made in the last year alone. Our economy grew by 4.4%. Unemployment in the city is at lowest levels since records began. We've met our target of increasing the business base 5 years ahead of schedule. And the number of people with degree-level qualifications continues to hugely outperform comparator cities such as Manchester, Birmingham and Liverpool. Greg's findings point to a rejuvenated financial sector, a large professional and skilled talent base, supported by a university and college sector which both attract and retains that talent. We are globally connected. We have a reputation in tourism and hospitality excellence and a dynamic and resilient retail market. We are affordable, giving us a real appeal among millennials and this might be my favourite bit, we are apparently the 12th most hipster city in Europe. And if you want to know how they measure that, they do measure it. They actually count things like vegan restaurants, coffee shops, tattoo parlours, men with complicated beards. I might have made that last one up. We know that we have a passion and commitment within our creative industries, which is one of those factors in that hipster index. There are traits that are also found in the city as a whole, as are that sector's capacity for attracting ideas and talent. And ONS figures show that we have over 21,000 jobs and 2,500 individual enterprises within Glasgow's creative industries. And in 2016, they generated almost £900 million. That's over a fifth of the total produced by the sector nationally in Scotland. Our recent European Championships, of course, which we co-hosted with Berlin, saw a staggering 280 million viewers tune in to see everything our city does at its absolute best. And just last night, the Euro Champs were awarded the event of the year at the Scottish Sports Awards, and rightly so. So from sport, arts, culture and nightlife to the unique character of our citizens, the world knows that something's happening in Glasgow. But equally, Professor Clark's report is clear-eyed and it is sober. It doesn't shy away from the persistent challenges that we face around productivity growth and around the numbers of unskilled and underqualified residents we have in the city. And it states that we continue to struggle to tell the story of our business brand in Glasgow, to tell the story in the world about our dynamic economy and our record of innovation. It also acknowledges the constraints resulting from our lack of public transport connectivity relative to our peer cities. And as a result of that, we now sit within the top third most congested, medium-sized developed cities. The Council and the Chamber together commissioned the report to provide us with a clear idea of what our challenges are and to know what the rest of the world thinks about us. It is an enormously stimulating and thought-provoking read and will, I believe, be a catalyst for helping us to take Glasgow's economy to the next stage. And the report identifies that stage as the fourth cycle in our economic progress, focusing on competitiveness, innovation and growth. We want to protect and enhance Glasgow's reputation, of course we do, but if we simply brush the more challenging findings in the report under the carpet, we will fail to move forward. To confront and overcome our challenges, we need to identify them and to understand them. We need to know the story that we want to tell, create the space that we need to shape and write that story, and then tell it together loudly and often. So I'm announcing today that we at the Council and the Chamber, along with our colleagues at Glasgow Airport this time, are commissioning Professor Clark to follow up on this initial report. And he'll bring together Team Glasgow to help us write our story. Together we'll develop a fresh, shared narrative, highlighting those areas of strength that aren't yet filtering through to the wider world. We can demonstrate progress. We can show investors, businesses, that if they come to Glasgow, not only will they see our challenges being addressed in real time, they'll also see a brand and a reputation for opportunity that is unrivaled in these islands. As you'd expect, I also want to talk through some of the successes of the past year, but particularly to emphasise the extent to which those have been delivered in partnership and collaboration. For the City Council and the Glasgow City Government, partnership working is no longer simply rhetoric or born out of legislative or public sector necessity. This is just how we work now. It's the new Glasgow way. I see the Council's central role as a facilitator and enabler for growing our city economy, ensuring that our partners from across all sectors are supported and empowered to deliver outcomes that make our city better for all of our people and for all of you to do your business successfully. Utilising the expertise of the people in this room and in our communities is crucial to the success of the city because it brings a breadth and depth of insight that simply can't be replicated by the Council acting alone. Perhaps the most high-profile example of this new way of working was our successful bid for a Channel 4 hub. And Channel 4's choice of Glasgow as one of their new locations does so much more than bring 50 high-end jobs to the city, extremely welcome though that is. It brings here key decision makers from a broadcaster with global profile and presence and significant spending power, and it cements our reputation as a city of rich cultural and creative diversity. But what was particularly striking about the way we did the bid, in the words of our inimitable bid chair, Stuart Cosgrove, was that it was the polar opposite of the corporate portfolio. It was led by those who know the sector best and supported by the logistical and technical support that the Council provides, and provides very well, I have to say. In a similar vein, taking a lead from some European competitor cities, over the past year, the Glasgow Nighttime Economy Commission has brought together industry leaders who enthusiastically volunteered their time and expertise, and has been co-chaired by myself and Jeff Ellis, one of the prime movers and influencers in Glasgow and Scotland's music scene, of course. Our nighttime economy is worth over £2 billion to the city economy and provides over 16,000 full-time jobs. It is not just a massive motor for the city's economic well-being, of course. It is part of what makes Glasgow Glasgow, part of what makes us who we are. But the city has sometimes had a fraught relationship with its clubs and its music venues. And that's why we established the Commission. And we intend to make public recommendations early in the new year to ensure that we not only maintain our reputation as a city where you have a great night out, but we enhance it. Our newly published digital strategy, which is on your chairs, fresh off the presses, was also developed in collaboration with industry and academic experts. And it makes a step change in our digital connectivity that is essential for our inclusive economic growth. For too long in Glasgow, the not spots of poor internet connectivity have directly correlated with areas of deprivation in the city, and that is not good enough. The digital strategy seeks partnerships with the private sector to install the infrastructure that we need for comprehensive fibre broadband coverage across the whole city and 5G capability. It includes a £30 million investment from City Fibre, the largest core infrastructure investment from them in the UK so far. Other digital partnerships are at an advanced stage of development, and we'll be able to report on those very soon. Our social enterprise strategy, another first for the city, was published earlier this year, and it was co-produced with that rapidly growing sector of our economy and will help to support and sustain its continued growth and the impact it has in our communities. Early in the new year, we will sign a memorandum of understanding with every single one of this city's academic institutions, universities, arts institutions, colleges and the Open University. We'll create a framework for the higher and further education sectors and the city government to work together to enhance and enrich our policy-making process. It will create a partnership of real depth between town and gown in Glasgow, and I believe it will be the first of its kind, certainly the first of that extent in the UK. Our Glasgow Economic Leadership Board, the GEL Board, continues to advise the city and to refresh and grow in the past year. And I'm delighted that a new Creative Industries Hub, chaired by Professor Janice Kirkpatrick, has also been added to GEL's key sector works. And Janice is on the panel later, so you'll hear more from her directly about the impact that she plans to have. But early areas of focus will be around shaping the Made in Glasgow programme and ensuring that our creative and cultural industries reach into every single neighbourhood of our city. And we'll be announcing more about our plans on that front before Christmas. And returning to the digital sector, Neil Logan, the CEO of Incremental Group, has also joined the GEL board this year to help us fill another gap in representation of key economic sectors in the city. And last year, I promised we would establish the Glasgow Partnership for Economic Growth, GPEG, to oversee the implementation of our economic strategy. If there's one thing we do well in Glasgow, it's acronyms, I have to say. I'm delighted to say that the main GPEG board and the hubs have convened, and we've received a tremendous commitment and contribution from our partners in the public, private, third and academic sectors. Again, their enthusiasm, their energy has been inspiring. Over the next few months, the hubs will consider the actions in the economic strategy and how their respective organisations can contribute to their implementation. The hubs have been designed as the delivery mechanisms for our collaborative work across the city economy, focusing on innovation, on skills and employability, and on support for businesses. And as Greg's report confirms, Our lack of transport connectivity in parts of the city is a barrier to economic progress, and one which the city government is determined to overcome. And the Connectivity Commission, which I announced at last year's State of the City, published its report last week. And it too makes compelling reading. It is visionary and transformative, and crucially it is deliverable if we are prepared to make the bold choices in the years ahead. And we do need to grasp the nettle to reduce the amount of road space we give over to cars, and to continue to invest in safer bicycle lanes, better pavements and increased pedestrianisation. And all the evidence shows that doing this will make our city more competitive economically, better for people to live and work and visit. So our city centre experience matches our aspirations for our city. More of our citizens rely on bus than any other mode of transport, and buses are long overdue a sharper policy focus, as the Connectivity Commission advised and confirmed for us. Improved bus services are absolutely critical to addressing the economic, social and civic exclusion felt by too many of our citizens. So that's why the City Council and our major bus companies have signed up to a new Glasgow bus partnership. The Council will install bus priority measures to improve journey times. In return, the industry will deliver better services, fares and routes. We share a determination to better connect our citizens and communities, and to reverse the precipitous decline in bus patronage that we've seen in Glasgow in recent years. The Glasgow City Region deal is one of the most advanced in the UK, and we are now delivering the projects in that deal at pace. Every penny of the deal is already committed towards an overall programme of work, which we continue to rigorously test to ensure that it provides the best inclusive economic value. Communities across this city and across the region are now seeing this investment in the ground, and there is a real visibility around the City Deal projects. Sighthill, for example, one of the most significant regeneration projects in Europe, will see hundreds of new homes completed by the end of next year, while the area's new park, which will be a real visitor destination, will be ready by next summer. And the Sighthill Bridge over the M8 has in the past week had its planning application submitted, and that will connect a too long neglected community back to the city centre, bridging physical barriers between people and place. City Deal investments also visible along the Clyde. £50 million is going to be spent over the next 5 years to shore up the city's key walls. Ground investigation works for the Govan-Partick Bridge are on site as we speak. Sucky Hall Street headed the queue as the first to benefit from the City Deal funded Avenues project, and £7.2 million has been invested to improve connectivity and Sucky Hall Street's overall look and feel. Of course, when that investment was announced, no one could have anticipated the additional challenges that the street would face this year. The impact on the lives of displaced residents and business owners following the fires at Victoria's nightclub and the Mackintosh School of Art has undoubtedly been difficult, and we can't underestimate that. 198 businesses, both inside and outside the cordon, have been supported by the Fire Recovery Fund, and residents were also supported through the Lord Provost Fund. And at this juncture, I'd like to take an opportunity to pay particular thanks to the City Council's business support team on the ground. They were on the ground within days of the Mackintosh fire taking place. And their tireless efforts to support an understandably traumatised business community have, I think, made a real difference. So Dominic Dowling, Graham Smith, Karen Fotheringham, Jim Mirren and Irene Holding have my particular thanks. However, the adversity that Sucky Hall Street has faced has also given us an opportunity to reimagine Sucky Hall Street as a model of a 21st century high street. Our city centre residential strategy, which will be complete by the middle of next year, will provide the foundations to get families and services back into our city centre. We'll need to be bold with our limited powers, such as compulsory purchase orders, And there needs to be an honesty about the expectations that we have of partners, including both governments, artistic and academic institutions, and local businesses, all of whom have a stake in the street's success. The innovation and entrepreneurialism of our city's businesses and people are assets that we are determined to harness and grow in Sauchiehall Street and right across the city. Innovation districts provide startups with the support to bolster resilience and resistance to key risks at a critical point in their life cycle. And the Glasgow City region will play host to Scotland's first 3 innovation districts, with the first officially launched in the early part of 2019. An incredibly exciting development for the city region. Watch this space, I would say, about our innovation districts. New business support initiatives from the Council, including our Space for Growth plan and the Community Business Boost programme, encourage start-up activity in the most disadvantaged parts of our city through support and subsidy for rents and rates. Repurposing the Council's own property will be a major focus in the coming year and beyond. We need to maximise our assets and be brave enough to pass on those that we are not making best use of just now, but which others, including community groups and local businesses, could make much better use of. Our Meanwhile Space initiative, for example, focusing initially on the High Street and the Salt Market, brings vacant shop fronts into productive use as incubation space for creative and design startups, and also brings fresh life back to a long neglected area of the city, which will now be supported by a long overdue comprehensive High Street area strategy. Circular Glasgow, a partnership between the Council and the Chamber of Commerce, was just this week shortlisted for a World Economic Forum Award. We are shortlisted alongside the governments of Denmark, the Netherlands, the European Commission, the City of Toronto and the Chinese province of Shandong. So it's a fantastic achievement for the city, an area we want to do much, much more on in the coming year. The potential return for Glasgow and for Scotland, if we embrace the circular economy, runs into billions of pounds, and Glasgow is at the forefront of this revolution. Our city has seen a return to population growth again after many decades of decline. And the task in front of us, particularly as a city council, but also businesses, colleges, partners, is to ensure as many of those citizens as possible are economically active. We have been developing, again, with the collaborative support of an outside expert group, and will bring forward early next year our inclusive city strategy, which will focus not just on support for Glasgow's refugee and migrant population to take advantage of employment opportunities, but also on encouraging employers to stop overlooking this valuable pool of skills and talent. Our economy needs skilled workers. Our migrant and refugee population provides them. It's that simple. And we'll continue to challenge the Home Office's absurd ban on asylum seekers earning a living. With ongoing shortages in several key sectors, the UK government's continuing exclusion of often highly skilled asylum seekers from the workplace makes no sense for anyone. There are 4,500 asylum seekers living in Glasgow just now, and many of those people could be making a contribution which would benefit the city economy, and most importantly, themselves and their families. It's more vital than ever that Glasgow maintains a global outlook. Glaswegians embrace internationalism, and we are now introducing new ways of working with other cities across Europe and across the rest of the world. Our commitment to link more effectively with other innovative cities across Europe has resulted in Glasgow leading on the development of the Ideas and Knowledge Exchange Network, which is fabulously known as ICANN. And I'm not sure that our partner cities in Barcelona, Amsterdam, Paris and Athens would necessarily get that gag, but we in Glasgow know that ICANN has a double meaning. But that platform connects Europe's leading cities of innovation to develop fresh ideas, and Glasgow is recognised as one of Europe's leading cities of innovation within that network. We are also working on signing partnerships with 8 European cities in advance of Brexit. Those partnerships will be nimble. They will outline the steadfast commitment this city has to being outward-looking, and they will share best practice to solve the challenges that cities collectively face in Europe and indeed globally. And we're identifying a list of global Glasgow ambassadors to sell the city to the world. Expats, also high-profile and mobile Glaswegians, or those with a deep affinity with our city, who we can call upon to fight our corner and promote Glasgow and its strengths. And seeing as how I have a captive audience here right now, we are more than open to volunteers. Please do get in touch. So, that's a bit of a summary of what we've done over the past year, where we are now, where we're heading in the months to come. What else do we do over the next year? Where is our focus going to lie? The City Council has our targets. We aim to create 3,500 jobs in the city from inward investment, 1,000 more than we created this year, and that's not including the Barclays investment, of which I will say more shortly. We will increase our digital connectivity by considerable steps to become one of the best connected cities in Europe. And we will redouble our efforts to increase the business base by another 500 businesses by this time next year. We have our Connectivity Commission to start implementing, and we will get going immediately where current resources allow and where there's the most clear alignment with our ongoing activity, such as the Avenues project. Professor Clark's report and his next piece of work gives us an even stronger understanding of the strategies that we need to face our challenges now in the future. So these and our other priorities will be the building blocks that will go towards positioning Glasgow as what Professor Clark calls a new world city, matching or exceeding the reach and reputations of our global peer cities, such as Bilbao, Rotterdam, Gothenburg, Pittsburgh, Adelaide, and driving forward that fourth economic cycle of competitiveness, innovation, and growth, building on the progress that we've made over the past 30 years. For Glasgow, we have a platform to do that, and it's to exploit our unique placing in the space where innovation, culture, and quality of life intersect to create something that is distinctively Glaswegian. That's our target for the next 5 years. And in the more immediate term, even more immediate term, our ambitions are to build on the investments that the city government has made in the council's key economic functions to position Glasgow as the best city in the UK in which to invest and do business. We will cement our position as a leader for smart cities, business innovation, and higher education. We will make sure that we are development and investment ready. We will ensure our story of business and entrepreneurialism reaches the right targets, and that our reputation for resilience, for partnership and collaboration, and for delivery helps realise the potential of our city, its business, and our people. One of the most challenging findings in Greg's report, challenging to our self-perception in Glasgow, is that Glasgow doesn't perform anywhere near as well as we should relative to those peer cities when it comes to jobs and inclusive growth. I spoke last year at the State of the City Economy about inclusive growth, and in the past year the Council and the City Region Cabinet have put a great deal of time and thought into ensuring that our understanding of what inclusive growth looks like in practice has become ever clearer. We must make that our top priority. The announcement earlier this year by Barclays Investment to create 2,500 jobs in Tradeston is the first of many inward investments in which the City deal will be a critical factor. The Barclays deal is the most significant inward investment ever made in Glasgow, and it is a beacon for what the public and private sector can achieve in close collaboration. The City has secured a commitment that 42% of the jobs will be high-value jobs, and 341 posts are ring-fenced for disadvantaged people entering the employment market or for people who have a disability. And we know that those two sectors overlap to a very considerable extent. And I have to say that our work in partnership with Scottish Enterprise on this was crucial. No matter how high profile or significant the inward investment, we will not shirk from insisting that the inclusive growth agenda must be a central consideration. And major investors like Barclays are taking on board our commitment to inclusive growth because they know that schemes like this are good for their own reputations, good for their ability to attract and retain talent and customers. And the Barclays example shows that when a city has a clear vision of what it wants to achieve for its places and its people, when it has the confidence to articulate that and to stand by that vision, investors will respond. They'll see the benefits to them of being part of something that's bigger than just their bottom line. And that's what will characterise Glasgow's approach to inclusive economic growth now and in the years to come. Not for us allowing young people and families to be priced out of newly regenerated popular neighbourhoods. Not for us a development gold rush diminishing the high quality standards that we expect in our new housing stock. Not for us, the high value jobs of the future being cut off to our young people entering the employment market directly from school or through the college route. We will be tireless in working to bring investment, new jobs and new homes to Glasgow, to innovate and create the industries of the future, to grow our population, our tax base and our city and regional economies, to become an exemplar new world city. But as we do so, we will keep a relentless focus on the motivation for all of that, to create a city that is more vibrant, more livable, more sustainable, healthier and more equitable. A city where the quality of life of every citizen is our abiding concern. That will be a challenge to us as a council, as a city government, and it will be a challenge to our partners in the private sector and elsewhere. But it's a challenge we'll be proud to take on because that's how we'll build the future Glasgow that will work for all of us. Thank you very much for listening.
Council Leader Susan, if I may, thank you very much for this fantastic speech that's covered an amazing terrain of Brexit, the business story, sports, culture, quality of life, connectivity, knowledge and innovation, inclusion, equity, participation, population growth and growth management, the city centre, internationalism, future priorities and how to sustain the momentum. So much in what you've said, Susan, and we look forward to the debate with you and the other panellists shortly. Susan mentioned right at the beginning of her speech that she'd commissioned some special analysis of the impact of Brexit upon the city of Glasgow, and our second keynote speaker this morning will address that and some of the wider economic issues. So please welcome the director of the Fraser of Allender Institute at Strathclyde University and the head of economics at the university, Professor Graham Roy.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Greg, and thanks very much for the opportunity to come along and speak with you this morning. And also, thank you for organising a breakfast event the day after the Fraser of Allender Christmas night out. So I was in my best behaviour last night, so a win for everybody there. We published a report in early October, commissioned by the City Region, looking at the potential implications for the area from Brexit. And I want to give you a quick overview of that and some reflections on that. I mean, in terms of the headline messages that we identify in the report and we conclude on, Probably they're not that surprising to you, but we live in really uncertain times, and any hope that that uncertainty is going to be washed away, even after Tuesday, or maybe not after Tuesday, then that's just not going to happen. And we're going to be living in a world for the next few years of significant economic and policy uncertainty. And it's going to be a long time before we're going to know what the full implications are of the decision to leave the European Union. And that's driven by a number of different factors. One is because, as economists, we have no real benchmark in order to compare to see how this could look at relative to what's happened before. And secondly, there's a whole number of different policy outcomes that could arise over the next few months and years. And that means that we're going to have to live through a world where potential decisions are going to be taken that we generally don't know what the final impacts will be. So our key message to everybody, to business, to policymakers, and to wider society is that preparation for living in a world of uncertainty is absolutely crucial. And I'll talk a bit more about the key areas that we recommend that people should focus on later. So first of all, the good news and the various economic analyses that have been done of potential risks from Brexit. And most independent economists would conclude that putting up significant trade barriers with your largest trading partners will act to harm your economy over the long term. The latest UK government analysis shows that under hard Brexit, after about 15 years, the economy would be around about 9% smaller than it otherwise would have been. And even under the government's favoured plan, you're still looking at a hit of around about 3% to our economy. And that's very similar to what the Scottish Government have identified. So they're looking at very similar numbers to what the UK Government have identified as being the potential long-term hit to the UK and Scottish economies of different forms of Brexit. But it's important to know that the economy will still grow. So what these forecasts are saying is this will be how the economy looks compared to otherwise remaining in the EU, but the economy will still grow. And that's one of the important things to take from all of this, is that the sun will rise on the 30th of March. And it's important we also not just think about how we mitigate the risks, but how we also look at the opportunities that will come for cities like Glasgow, but also nations like Scotland in the years ahead. But one of the big challenges that we face, as I mentioned, is that if we get into a period where there's significant uncertainty, so we leave with no deal, then the potential risks to our economy become even more significant in the short run. And you're probably aware of the work that the Bank of England published last week, which looked at the various scenarios for different types of Brexit with no deal. And probably their most significant and scary scenario was of a disorderly Brexit, where essentially a series of scenarios kick off that means that the UK immediately is out of various trade deals, out of regulations, and has significant challenges on day one. And to put that in context, the Bank of England's analysis is predicting that on that worst case scenario, you would face a hit to our economy of around about 8% of GDP. And to put that in context, that's double the size of the financial crisis recession that we had here in Scotland. And if the scenarios feed through to what they predict in terms of unemployment, that would be equivalent to about an extra 100,000 people in Scotland being unemployed from the most disorderly Brexit. Now, of course, there's questions about how likely this is, and you can agree or disagree about whether you think a scale of the shock of that significance is something that would happen in reality. But I guess the key point, what it does do is just highlight the scale of the risks that are involved here, that if you have the worst case scenario coming through from Brexit, then the potential shock to our economy is significant and substantial. So what we do in our report is look at what we think might be the key avenues through which Brexit might have an impact on the Glasgow city region, and also what we think that firms and policy institutions should focus on in terms of making the preparations. So first of all, some key facts, some key important points to illustrate the strength of the Glasgow economy that we all operate in. So as a major European city, we know that Glasgow has a strong and diverse business base. It accounts for around about 30% of Scotland's GVA, so about 30% of the entire Scottish economy. It's home to about a working population of over 1 million people, and it's home to about 30% of all businesses here in Scotland. And we identify 6 broad channels through which we think Brexit will have an impact on the Glasgow economy. So first of all, and most obviously, through exports, so the various trading relationships we have with key European partners, but crucially, most exports and most trade that happens in an economy is not between consumers and businesses selling to consumers, but between business to businesses as they operate in complex supply chains across different markets. And if we've heard already the importance of international investment to a city like Glasgow, again, what might happen to that under different scenarios for Brexit. The labour market, again, we know that we rely on key European workers to support vital public services, but also many of the key skills that we have in the private sector. And the final couple of uncertainties around what the policy environment might look like. We rely on the EU for a significant number of our regulations and rules and laws, and what will that look like under different scenarios for Brexit. And finally, as I said, like it or not, we're going to live in a world of increasing uncertainty and substantial uncertainty for the foreseeable future. And that's going to pose a challenge to our economy, and we need to build resilience in order to cope with that. So some key points, key stats just to illustrate all of that we pull out in the report. Around about 40%, so just over 40% of Scotland's international exports are to the European Union. We export more to the European Union than we do to North America, Asia, South America, the Middle East and Australasia combined, and that's worth about £12.5 billion every single year. So while it's okay to say, yes, under Brexit we'll have an opportunity to form new trade deals with other countries, but there's a reason why you trade a lot more with countries that are near to you, and that's because they're near to you. So it's all very well having a trade deal with Australia, but if you're exporting milk to Australia, then you're essentially exporting cheese. So again, we just need to put in context the scale and the importance of the European market to Scottish exporters, both here in Glasgow and further afield. And we've done some modelling to try and estimate the number of jobs that we believe are tied to European demand, both in Glasgow City region, and also Scotland as a whole. And in Scotland as a whole, we estimate that there's around about 135,000 jobs in Scotland are tied to EU demand, either through direct demand or through wider spillover effects into various supply chains. In Glasgow, that's about 20,000 jobs, and in the Glasgow City region, that's around about 40,000 jobs. So significant numbers of jobs and investment and opportunity come from, at the moment, from access to European markets. And it really matters for sectors as well. So if you look at that, the direct jobs in the Glasgow City region from that are coming from EU demand, about 25,000, about 17,000 of these jobs are in services, about 7,000 of these jobs in manufacturing. So the importance of understanding just how significant demand is, not just at an aggregate level, but for individual firms, industries and sectors, is absolutely crucial. And that matters not just in the Glasgow context, but in a Scottish context. And these numbers are really interesting in putting into the scale and the importance of some sectors which might not always get the most significant attention in terms of where we're going in terms of the Brexit debate. And I'll just leave you with the thought that out of that 80,000 jobs in Scotland supported by direct demand, the kind of fishing industry is less than 3,000. So again, it just shows you the relative importance of some sectors which don't always get the attention that they deserve, and also sometimes as well that the noise that some sectors make might not always be correlated with their relative economic importance. So that's stats and number of exports. But as I mentioned as well, what's really crucial for Scotland is the reliance upon EU migrants into our economy. So as we know, Scotland's working age population is projected to fall over the next few years. And we've relied heavily in the past on attracting EU migrants into the country in order to support public services, but also to support growth across the wider economy. There's about 230,000 EU nationals living in Scotland, with about 57,000 EU nationals living in Glasgow, and they support work across a whole variety of different sectors, whether that be in the NHS or in sectors like my own in universities. And as we heard already, Scotland and Glasgow has punched above its weight as a location for attracting international investment. So Scotland is second in the UK and has consistently been second in the UK for attracting international investment. And Glasgow's ranked 6th in the UK for attracting inward investment. And we know that one of the key reasons that many companies come to Scotland and come to the UK is that because you can come to the UK and then you can access the entire single market. And we need to think about how we're going to cope with that in a world where we're no longer part of that. Now, it's understandable in a world where there's so much uncertainty around that it's difficult for businesses and the public sector to plan for what might happen post-March next year. But like it or not, and I know that 30% believe that Remain will still happen, but like it or not, Brexit is happening, and the sooner that people prepare for that, then the better. And there's that brilliant quote from President Eisenhower, which always says that we always found that plans are useless, but planning is everything. So we don't know what the world will look like next year, but that's not an excuse to do nothing about it. And it's really important that businesses and the public sector plan for that and prepare for the challenges that will come down. And one of the worrying things about Brexit, and one of the key things that the Bank of England identified, is that the planning for various outcomes has not happened yet. So we did a survey of Scottish businesses, and we found that about 62% of Scottish businesses are not prepared for Brexit, despite it only being 3 months away. And 3/4 of them said that there wasn't adequate information for them in order to prepare for the different scenarios that are coming down the line. So it's really important that businesses prepare, businesses get ready for the challenges, but also the opportunities that will come post-March once we leave the European Union. So what we do in the report and what we encourage people to do when they're reading our work is to focus on this simple diagram and be able to answer the questions about what this might mean for your policy institution, what it might mean for your business. So what might happen in terms of exports and imports? How connected are you to the key supply chains in Europe? And what does that mean for your business model? How dependent are you on EU migrants and EU workers for your labour market? What about if you've got UK workers operating in the EU? What's your policies? What's your reassurance that you're giving to them? How you might be impacted by different regulations that will come in post-March next year if we're no longer part of EU regulations and we're moving to UK or new Scottish regulations? What might be the implications for international investment? How dependent are you on attracting international investment to support your economy? And what risks might that be under a different scenarios for Brexit? And then finally, how resilient are you to cope with significant uncertainty over the next couple of years as we move to whatever outcome it is that we're going to? So it's really crucial that everybody prepares. But it's also crucial that we continue to focus on the things that we can control. And we've already heard a lot from that from Susan Aitken about the work that's going on here in Glasgow to focus on the tools that we can control and the opportunities that we can try and take irrespective of the outcome of Brexit. And I guess that's one of the frustrations that we have with Brexit is that the important debates we should be having about as a country and as a city about where our economy is going sometimes gets crowded out because we're spending so much time talking about Brexit. And we know that as a country and as a city, we're rich and prosperous, but we also know that our productivity lags behind some of the key markets that we want to compete with. So it takes the Danes and the Dutch 4 days to produce what it takes 5 days for us here in Scotland. We know that with all the great work and inclusive growth that's gone on, still 1 million people in Scotland live in households that are classified in relative poverty. Nearly one in four children in Scotland live in households that are classified in relative poverty. And it's important we also focus on the big long-term challenges that we face as a country, so whether it be through demographic change, whether it be through climate change, or whether it be through the risks and opportunities that come from automation. And it's important as well that we also focus on the domestic policies and the risks and opportunities that are coming with that. So the Cabinet Secretary is preparing next week for the Scottish budget. And in there's some really big questions about the future of public spending in Scotland and where we're going to prioritise in ever-tight budgets, and big questions about the future taxation policies of Scotland and how Scotland positions itself, not just compared to the rest of the UK, but also internationally. So the sun will rise next April once we leave the European Union, but the more we can do to prepare for the various outcomes, then the better positioned the city and the nation and businesses will be for the new dawn that will emerge. Thank you.
Professor Roy Graham Thank you very much indeed. A strong focus in Graham's remarks, not just on the evidence and the business settlement or business sentiment behind the looming Brexit, but also extolling the virtues of planning, preparedness and resilience in the face of the changes that are coming. We move now to our guest of honour for today's conference, and many of you will know that following a stellar career in local government in Renfrewshire, Derek Mackay entered the Scottish Parliament in 2011. Since then, he's held 3 ministerial posts as Minister for Transport and Islands, Minister for Local Government and Planning, and now as Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work. Please welcome our guest of honour, Derek Mackay, MSP.
Thank you, Greg. I, like Professor Roy, was on my best behaviour last night as well. I was at the Chamber of Commerce annual dinner, and the reason I was on my best behaviour, I was at the same table as my boss, the First Minister, so I'm not in recovery mode this morning, I'm glad to say. I'm delighted to be the guest of honour. This is my second invitation. I was here last year, and I was so impressed with the gathering of bringing together the private and the public sector and all key partners. I actually thought this was a stellar event in which to highlight the good work and also share the ideas, and I'm sure the questions will come shortly. But the main thing I've learned so far, of course I was impressed with the Council's work and the Council leader and the presentation from Professor Graham Roy. I have learnt this. In the first week, as according to the Economists of Scotland, an institute, the first week of December, the Thursday night, is the optimal moment to have your Christmas night out. So in future planning, book that day and we'll send the cost soaring in that particular date in terms of nightlife vision. Look, I have got a new role in Scottish Government as Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work. That's actually a change. My previous role was financing the Constitution, and for obvious reasons the First Minister has asked me to focus absolutely on finance and the economy. So just as the challenge has been set that Brexit is unfolding around us in terms of those negotiations, I am 100% focused on the economy, and similar to as the Council leader has set out, it's for a very specific reason. I believe in pro-growth, pro-business, pro-development, because through that growth we will build a fairer society. And if you ask me what's the number one thing I can do to support our country, it's actually create meaningful employment. Actually, if I don't deliver the economic policies, our social policies are out of reach. And that's why I'm particularly pro-sustainable, inclusive growth. And through the Economic Action Plan I launched earlier this year, I've tried to build a more cohesive approach, bringing together our strategies and our policies to have an aligned approach with all our agencies to support that economic growth agenda. That's why partnerships such as those with the City Council and the private sector are so important to deliver that growth in these turbulent and challenging times. Hopefully, I wasn't going to mention Brexit too much because that has dominated so much of our news and our considerations and even our gathering this morning. But Brexit is a challenge to our economic growth, the government's vision and the city vision, and of course the vision of many companies in Scotland as well. But through that we must navigate our way to keep on being focused on that which we can deliver, and that's what I've been doing. I'm reassured some multinational companies are prepared for Brexit. I'm not quite so sure, as has been referenced, that a lot of SMEs are prepared for Brexit. Prepared for what? We might as well rerun that poll that we've conducted half an hour ago to see what the outcome of the negotiations might be. The Prime Minister, either accidentally or intentionally, said it was her deal or no Brexit. I'll take no Brexit. Thank you very much. But we have tried as a government to compromise with the UK government to try and get the whole of the UK government in a better place. And that would be, if we have to have Brexit, at least staying in the single market, and the customs union would be the least damaging option for the UK and for Scotland. I happen to believe there's a majority in the House of Commons to achieve that outcome. I happen to believe that there's not a majority in the House of Commons for the Prime Minister's deal. So we must try and find the consensus for the least damaging Brexit, if Brexit must happen at all. As Scottish Government, we are hoping for the best. We're now planning for the worst, whilst at the same time trying to get the least worst outcome for the whole of the UK and for Scotland. So we'll be doing more around business support, preparations, recalibrating our systems to help companies through this specifically. But it is a challenge to our shared agenda. But more positively, our economy, although subdued, and subdued for a number of issues, has been performing relatively well. Near record low unemployment, record low, joint record low unemployment as it stands at the moment. Strong levels of employment. Record amounts of foreign direct investment over the last few years. Scotland outperforms most other parts of the United Kingdom, and on research and development outperforms every part of the United Kingdom on foreign direct investment, research and development. That's really significant, because with R&D follow other jobs. On gross domestic product, we're outperforming the United Kingdom, have been for 12 months. That's significant. 1.7% growth compared to 1.3% growth. It doesn't always feel like it, and we don't always hear that, but actually our economic performance, although subdued, for the reasons we well understand, is good. I've stressed why I think we need more economic growth and why we want to stimulate that as a government, and my budget will do that next week. I can't preview the budget, but I think there will be announcements that will show how we are trying to provide both stability, stimulus, and sustainability for our public services and our economy. And as I say, I've already announced a number of actions in the Economic Action Plan, and if you're not familiar with it, please check it out on the government's website. Because it's not more narrative, more strategies and words, it's the actions that the government will undertake to support our economy, trying to address the key challenges that we have structurally in our economy, such as the productivity, the population challenge as well. I understand the need for a competitive tax regime, but equally I want a country that's in the race to the top in terms of quality of life, and not necessarily that race to the bottom on tax. And I do believe that the reason that many people choose to live, work and invest in Scotland is because of our values and because of the place that we are building, and the council leaders identified a few examples, whether it's Channel 4 or Barclays Bank, just to name two. And that competitive tax regime, the most competitive package of business rates relief anywhere in the United Kingdom, no business rates until first occupation, doesn't exist south of the border. That tax relief doesn't exist south of the border. Or the growth accelerator, if you improve your property, there's further tax relief, doesn't exist south of the border. It was designed intentionally to try and stimulate property and support business in challenging times. And I've committed through the Barclay Review to more frequent revaluations, so property values are actually more accurately reflected in the non-domestic rates bill, rather than the delay that's been encountered in the past. So those are some of the recommendations that have been welcomed from the business community. We've got wonderful opportunities around internationalisation, promoting Scotland, promoting the city, and actually promoting our exports with whatever outcome comes in trade agreements. And only last night, the First Minister announced an extra £2 million just to support the Chambers of Commerce in trade missions, and chamber-to-chamber and business-to-business trade missions. We want to support more companies to be able to export. Too few companies in Scotland do that, and if we get more scaled up to export, it gives them greater resilience and greater economic growth. So we have more specialist support and more business-to-business peer mentorships as well, so that we can learn from the best in our country around exports and internationalisation and share that right across the commercial landscape. But in terms of public sector support for the commercial landscape as well, we're building a new bank, the Scottish National Investment Bank, that will be focused on providing long-term patient capital finance for key economic investments. And that'll be guided by mission-oriented approach set by government, but absolutely central in our minds is to support private sector growth. In terms of that public sector infrastructure as well, the motorway improvements have been significant. There's more on heavy rail as well. You'll be familiar with the Queen Street investment. Now, I know with transport investment comes some disruption, but my granny used to tell me it'll be great when it's finished, son. and it really will. The transport infrastructure that we are building will be absolutely worth it. And there's more to come, because the government has announced that we want to raise the levels of infrastructure investment much closer to international standards so that we can unlock the economic potential of our country. And that's both transport, housing and digital as well, because digital absolutely is the future. And some of the major financial interventions that we've made have included the City Region deal, contributing over £500 million to that 20-year plan to try and stimulate that economic development in partnership with the private sector. Now, the Council leader, Susan Aitken, mentioned industrialisation and post-industrial Scotland. Industrialisation is no longer a thing of the past. We can re-industrialise Scotland with the technologies and the opportunities of the future. For example, the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, which will be in Renfrewshire, it will bring together world-leading research and innovation so that we can scale up the kind of commercialisation and industrial opportunities that still exist in our society. That will be good for skills, it will be good for productivity, and it will be good for business growth. We'll also work with SDDI on productivity clubs, again to share the experience and the good ideas and the dynamism that exists in relation to productivity, and that's how we'll help businesses tackle the productivity challenge. We've worked very closely with the City Council on a growth strategy around investment, infrastructure, innovation, but we've also worked very closely with our academic institutions as well. And the best partnerships I'm seeing right now in terms of that commercialisation is between the public and the private sector, where we're designing it together. In the college estate, massive investment around both the estate and the design within that as well. See, the First Minister's made it clear we don't just want to be the consumers of products. We in Scotland want to go back to a time of enlightenment where we are the creators, the architects, the designers, the innovators of our future. And that has extreme positive commercial value as well. Well, that's in the college sector and the universities. It's so important that we seize those challenges and opportunities that the enterprise and skills review are focused upon. But we and our partners are putting our money where our mouths are. In terms of the universities, all of them of Glasgow, they're focused on the city's economy and economic success, I would argue, like never before. Because I recognise what business and industry wants from an education system. The skills and the accreditation and the people and the supply chain that gives business and industry what they want and where the jobs will be and the economic opportunities will be in the future, as well, of course, those who choose to come and study here. Now, in terms of investment, Glasgow University, of course, is investing over £1 billion in their estate, which is a fantastic investment, and with further expansion plans connected to industry. Strathclyde University, focusing on that work that I've mentioned with advanced manufacturing, is doing a power of work in our international efforts as well. Glasgow Caledonian University, of course, are very focused on that vocational element and a meaningful purpose on the following of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in our city, there's a lot going on, and it's connecting that innovation with commercialisation, and that's to be welcomed. The Council also well understands we're addressing historic issues of intergenerational poverty and inequality. But I am convinced by that job creation, quality, purposeful, meaningful jobs is the way to help tackle that intergenerational poverty that we have all inherited. But let's just not inherit the difficulties of the past, but help grow our economy in a way that can address that dereliction of society. And on that subject, there is, of course, a lot of derelict land from our industrial past in the city, and that's why we're working in partnership to try and remediate it and bring it back into use. That's why our strategy is not just for the city centre, but for all parts of the city of Glasgow and the wider region that is supported by the dynamo that is the city. So we've got particular initiatives in unlocking that currently stalled sites land or derelict land to bring it back into productive use. Again, more positively, we're attracting companies and investors from across the world, and you are as well as businesses. The business-to-business engagement is so important. A lot of people don't know that Glasgow continues to be internationally attractive for inward investment, as in the UK's top 10 for attracting foreign direct investment, attracting 16 new projects in 2017. And next year when I go to MIPIM, the world's largest property conference, I want to promote Glasgow, the good work that's going on, and showcase the propositions that are live and ready to be funded here in the city now. I welcome the work of the Connectivity Commission. I think it's raised a number of very bold and challenging issues and ideas. And I think it recognises that Glasgow has been transforming and will continue to transform to be that attractive place to come, live, work and invest, in addition with that infrastructure investment. And I recognise the challenge as a former Transport Minister around more people using buses as a form of transport, but the patronage has gone down whilst the pressures on rail have increased. So I think we will have to take bold decisions and be supportive to ensure that the city centre and the city continues to be an accessible and a pleasant place. That will also require integrated transport, and that will make such a difference to the transport networks and the accessibility. But equally, global connectivity is important, and Glasgow Airport specifically has enjoyed great success in 2017, being Glasgow Airport's busiest year, and has now close to 10 million passengers travelling through it annually. New routes, more routes, and welcome economic growth. And as I've touched upon digital, that's part of our connectivity future as well, and the ambitions for the digital future for the city are strong, worthwhile, and are to be commended. It should be a hot spot that people want to come to provide employment here because of that connectivity. So that digital technology drive is so important, but so too is the skills-based and the pioneering work on creating new companies, such as in fintech, where Scotland is absolutely leading the way. So I commend the strategy on reaching our full potential in the digital world and the work that will be done in 5G coming to Glasgow as quickly as possible, and a very welcome announcement from EE. So I absolutely support that strategy because there is economic opportunity in big data, innovations, technology, and data analytics. We need not fear automation. It is a theme running across the globe. We need not fear it as long as we are investing to be the designers digitally, the architects, the creators, and leading the way in technology and education. So we'll continue to work with academia to try and commercialise those opportunities naturally. Of course, this city hosts the government's enterprise agency and has worked in close partnership with many of you, and not least in the announcements that we've heard about, such as Barclays itself. We've done a lot of work under the radar in terms of safeguarding jobs, but the ability to promote and attract people to Scotland and to Glasgow specifically is important because our brand and our reputation is strong. And we need to promote more of that in a coordinated and cohesive way. And that's where the new regional economic partnerships will also make a difference, as will the city-region deal. And one other element of the City Council's budget and actions that I welcome was investing more in planning and economic development. Some politicians might not think that should have been a priority. I do. I think we need a planning and economic development function that is enabling, supporting development, so the Council was right to invest in that particular service within the City Council. And equally, the planning bill that's working its way through the Scottish Parliament at the moment, I want to be about enabling development as well, so that business and developers have certainty, with, of course, appropriate engagement with communities as well. The Council leaders touched on the adversity that this city has faced, and most recently the Glasgow fires. And I hope the government was quick to respond as well in our support for the Glasgow Fire Recovery Fund and other measures to give relief around the incidents that have taken place there. And maybe I will say a bit more about that at the budget next week. But the point I would make now is this, that Glasgow is resilient, its people are wonderful, and they always rise to the challenge and unite to the adversity that they face. And we in Scotland, I think, sometimes find fault in ourselves so too easily, but at the Chamber of Commerce dinner last night, it was the Chief Executive of the London Stock Exchange that was being really positive about Scottish business, start-ups, scale-ups, and the entrepreneurs that we have in Scotland. So maybe we do need to celebrate our positives a bit more and showcase that a bit more around the globe so that they can join with us in that economic success that we wish to deliver. Of course, Glasgow's got a good track record in that regard, a city of culture and a city of very successful events such as the European Championships and the Commonwealth Games, where, yes, there is an economic legacy from hosting these. But there will surely be a massive legacy from Channel 4's decision to locate a hub here in the city, not just for those jobs that it will create, but because of the image and the supply chains it will create, and it will boost our broadcasting capabilities in Scotland. It's good for the whole country and not just the city. And who knows, with that Glasgow effect, maybe it'll even lead to even better Channel 4 programmes to be broadcast as well. See, I know I've made it because apparently I featured on a quiz show, I think it's called Tipping Point, who's Scotland's Finance Secretary, and this guy from England didn't have a clue. I don't feel bad about that because arguably most people in Scotland wouldn't have a clue. But maybe with that deeper broadcasting access in Scotland, what we're doing in Scotland will be more greatly promoted. And it'll also allow further opportunities for the talent in Scotland. But the big announcement for Glasgow has to be Barclays. And the reason for that is the partnership approach between the public and the private sector, City Council and Scottish Enterprise, to ensure that Barclays chose to bring 2,500 jobs to the city, regenerating a part of the city that's needed it so much. Such a significant investment. And back to inclusive growth. The financial services sector is going out of its way to employ people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and I think that's to be commended for a whole host of reasons. Because if we don't address the social challenges in our country, we pay for social failure. So it's right that we all work together to stimulate their economy in an inclusive and a fair way. Inclusive growth where everyone can contribute to it and benefit from it. And that's why I'm so enthused by the financial services sector's particular approach on inclusive growth at this point in time, and having worked in partnership with us to bring those jobs to Scotland. And I hope that it will be the first of many in terms of new jobs coming to Scotland, further enhancing our reputation as a banking and financial services centre of excellence. In terms of the collaboration between Scottish Enterprise and the City Council, there'll be more of that. But it is the Team Scotland approach that can reach out to businesses, get things done. On any subject, you can normally get the right people and the right room to take decisions to be able to move things on in Scotland. And that's the kind of pragmatic, positive, constructive, action-focused approach that we should take. So looking ahead to my budget next week and to the actions thereafter, I want to make clear my own personal commitment to investing in Glasgow and to continue that partnership working. As Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work, I need to find the economic consensus and the social and political consensus in Scotland to get a budget through. I will set out a budget that focuses on stability, stimulus and sustainability, that focuses on the economy, education and our environment, that delivers on infrastructure, innovation, inclusive growth and internationalisation. Because those are the things that businesses have been asking me to do. And I have set tests on tax reform, protect the economy, support lower income earners, deliver a more progressive system, but deliver the necessary revenues that invest in the things that we need to grow and build our country, and that's what I'll do. I remain focused on sustainable economic growth, and I hope to deliver the actions to deliver upon those words. So the Scottish Government is a government committed to unlocking Scotland's economic potential across all cities and all regions. And we are determined to work with you all to make it happen here in Glasgow and beyond. Thank you very much for listening.
Cabinet Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your remarks. You talked at the beginning about the importance of jobs and that your role is to deliver the opportunity for job creation in Scotland and in Glasgow. You went on to talk about the priority for the least damaging Brexit possible. You talked about the particular business advantages of Scotland and the role of Scottish business in trade and exports. You mentioned, of course, the Scottish National Investment Bank, the new approach to infrastructure investment that's coming forward. You addressed productivity. You addressed poverty and inequality. You talked about the reinvestment and the reuse of land, the importance of focusing on the digital dividend and addressing the digital divide. You spoke about the brand reputation of Scottish business and of Glasgow, the tackling the recovery and the trauma from the recent fires, the importance of the Barclays investment and the commitment of the private sector to inclusive growth, and you ended with your call for greater partnership between the Scottish Government, the sectors and the cities, and your commitment to deliver that next week in your budget. Thank you very much indeed, Cabinet Secretary. Let's now invite our panellists, if we may, to come and join the stage, and we're going to have our panel discussion. The way we're going to do this is that we'll use the voting that you have focused on in the Slido technology. Please come and take a seat. More than 115 questions have now been posed, and more than 2,000 votes have been made by you in the audience on the questions that you want to be put. And we're going to try to take them one by one, as it were, asking each of the panelists to speak to them. But I will begin by just introducing our two additional panelists, in addition to our three speakers that we've already had. So we're delighted to welcome to the panel Ross Martin, who's an independent advisor on regional economies and has been a member of the Connectivity Commission that has recently reported and is leading a great deal of work on inclusive economy. And with Ross, we have Professor Janice Kirkpatrick, OBE, who's the chair of the Glasgow Economic Leadership Creative Industries Sector Group. And Janice's interests cover creative industries and culture, but of course also placemaking, urban design, the role of land, the role of place, really, in the productivity of an economy. So please join me in welcoming both Ross and Janice to the stage. Just before we start to ask the questions, Janice, would you just say a little bit about what the Creative Industries Sector Group is doing? And Ross, would you just say a little bit about the Connectivity Commission and where that got to with its report last week? Janice.
The Creative Industries Sector Group, I think we have many tasks. We're coming at this really from a standing start because it's like an iceberg. We've been beavering away now for many decades, and our story hasn't been told, partly because of the complexity of the sector. It has between 12 and 15 subsectors. It also has design, which is a huge opportunity for Glasgow because design was invented in this place in 1753, and we have a preeminent global position. And people who come through design industries in Glasgow are working for the world's biggest brands, biggest names, building its biggest cities. We're a massive success story that's not been told. So I have to start with telling the story, explaining what the sector is, what the potential is. 92% of creative industries are growing in Scotland since 2010. We've been growing at 47%. It's a massive, it's twice the rate of growth of any other industry sector in the UK. 92% of creative industries are currently growing, and 61% of these are committed to steady long-term growth. So this isn't a quick flash in the pan. A lot of people think that digital is all about fast growth. These businesses are committed for the long term, and we have to help attract them to our place, help them capitalize themselves and be here for the longer term. I also have a kind of more immediate challenge, and I've been working with especially Strathclyde University on hooking up with the potential through engineering, technology and science so that design can add value and help us realize the potential of the intellectual property we create through these things to grow businesses such as consumer goods businesses in Glasgow that will employ people and that can export and that can be here for the longer term. I'm really interested in the educational preconditions to allow this to happen. We need to go well beyond STEM subjects and include art and design in the curriculum from primary school onwards. It's not good enough that designers go to higher education with no pre-understanding of the subject area. It means that we're not ready to spin out businesses. We need to find a new way of mentoring new businesses, using existing businesses to accelerate the growth of this sector. It's really important. We also have the opportunity to create, and I'm really excited about this, brilliant apprenticeships. Glasgow is a place that really understands the importance of making things, not just high-tech things, but things that also use our hands and our eyes and our more traditional skills. And I think Councillor MacDonald really understands this. He's really interested in working with us to explore how people can actually make Glasgow. And this isn't about returning to the past. This is about growing luxury brands. It's using potential that exists within the city, using resources such as we have the Scottish Leather Group. We produce the best quality leather, tanned leather in the world, yet we don't have apprentices to create luxury brands where there are massive margins and great opportunities for growth. Glasgow is, first and foremost, about quality and excellence. I couldn't agree more with the Minister. It's not a race to the bottom. It's a race to the top. And we have, through our creative industries, the potential to ensure Glasgow leads in the creative industries, this fastest growing sector in the UK. There's over 2 million jobs in this. 11% of all businesses are creative businesses. We have got a net contribution in GVA to the UK economy of over 101 billion. It's unbelievable opportunity. We're at the heart of this, and we can lead not just in the UK, but we can actually be a major global player, but we have to change the story.
Great. Janice, thank you very much indeed. You won't be surprised to hear there's quite a few questions have come in on this topic, and in a minute we'll be asking you what do we need to do to really realise your vision and the ambition that you've shared there. Ross, will you tell us a little bit about the Connectivity Commission and perhaps some of the work you're doing on inclusive growth?
Okay, so the Connectivity Commission reported its first stage just a couple of weeks back, and in that first stage we looked at all of the parts of the transport system and infrastructure which is the responsibility of the City Council. So the management of road space, air quality, parking, buses and the like. And in the spring we'll look at the wider regional aspects of transport. But we're not looking at the kit and caboodle for kit and caboodle's sake. We're looking at the transport system in terms of its ability to support inclusive economic growth. And how do we reconnect parts of the city, for example? So a couple of stats, if I may. So if you look at the peripheral neighbourhoods of Glasgow, then not very well served by the bus network, and the bus network is the steepest decline in bus patronage for any city in the UK. And at the same time, we have the best performing suburban rail network, which is connecting the suburban parts of the city region really well with the city centre. So it's that contradiction and contrast element which runs through the report, and looking at how we can better connect those parts of the city and the sections of the population who have been left behind. So roughly speaking, 2/3 of the population of the city are doing pretty well in terms of the growth journey, and 1/3 not so, and we need to reconnect them by using transport infrastructure. So I never managed to get my favourite title for the report on the front cover, but I think it explains what we're trying to do pretty well. So it was going to be a mashing together of two of Glasgow's slogans. So if you bear with my crunchy English here, then more people make Glasgow's miles better. Would be a good explanation of the productive use of road space, for example. You know, Glasgow has more road space than any other UK city. It's more parking places than any other UK city, and one of the lowest car ownerships. So there's those contradictions and contrasts that we're trying to tackle, and the report deals with some of them wrapped around within that inclusive growth agenda.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Ross. And people who want to read the report can get it from the website, I think.
It's on the Council's website, yeah.
Great. Let's now go to your questions, if we may. And the way that Slido works is it's going to put up on the screen the top 3 questions that you've been asking while you've been thinking about this. And what I'm going to try to do is allocate a question to each of the panellists. Panellists, if I ask somebody else a question that you want to comment on, just dive in, okay, when they've given their remarks. So the first one, Susan, is about the River Clyde. And it asks the question, how does Glasgow plan to maximise opportunities from its most valuable but neglected physical assets, the River Clyde? 68 people have voted for this question, and I thought I'd pitch this to you. Coming after that will be the airport and connectivity with the rail link. And Ross, we'd like you to pick that up. Then there's a question about disadvantage and skills and participation in the economy. And Graham, we want you to pick that up, if you will. The one that comes after that, you can't see it here because that's the latest one, is about the digital arena. And Derek, if I may call you Derek, we'd like you to pick up the digital aspect. And the one that comes after that is about the city centre and its quality of place. And Janice, I'm hoping you'll pick that one up. So let's start with those five. Those are the five most popular questions so far. So Susan, how will Glasgow maximise the opportunities from the River Clyde?
Well, I think I touched on it in my speech earlier. The first part is making the River Clyde actually making it possible for us to build and grow on the banks of the river, because there are huge sections of the Clyde just now where we're simply not able to do that because it's not safe to, because the quay walls underneath the Clyde, some of which are well over 100 years old, are in large stretches not in good condition. Now, some of those are in the ownership of the City Council and therefore in our control to invest in. Others are, and quite significant stretches, are not in our ownership. And it's one of those things that had, we can all picture those parts of the Clyde that have sat as wastelands, essentially, for generations now. And I think it's been a frustration of every Glaswegian, especially when we go to other cities where the rivers are quite rightly at the heart of the city and define the city to a significant extent. We in Glasgow talk about the Clyde a lot, but in actual fact for many decades really have not used the Clyde very well. But the opportunity of the city-region deal provided that ability for us to do that infrastructure investment, which you won't see to begin with because it's under the water. And there's quite a bit of the city deal investment is like that. It's enabling infrastructure investment. It's fixing drainage. One of the we joke about it. My colleague Kevin Rush, who's the Director of Regional Economic Growth, and our favourite project within the City Region deal is the Metropolitan Glasgow Strategic Drainage Partnership. There's something to set, it sets your blood racing. But it is incredibly important because there are big parts of the north of the city where if we don't sort out the surface water problem, the drainage issues, the flooding issues, then we will not be able to develop that land. And the same is true of the Clyde. So we have to do some invisible to the public eye investment in order to then facilitate and enable development on those parts of the Clyde that have been neglected for a long time. But precisely by demonstrating the confidence that we have to kind of put our money where our mouth is, if you like, and say, we will make that investment. We've seen from the Barclays announcement that further investment will follow from that. They will see that we're taking the first steps, those enabling steps, and then they can follow and create the development, the jobs, build new homes on the parts of the Clyde that are neglected just now. So that's really what the strategy is, that we make the banks of the Clyde fit for purpose. And connectivity is a huge part of it as well. So the Govan-Partick Bridge, we're starting right now on site, the preparatory groundwork for that. I think it's important to see a lot of these things in the city deal. You'll understand as business people, there's been an awful lot of preparatory work, of legals and a lot of work to ensure that because we have to demonstrate this to both governments, that we are delivering the best possible value return for that investment. And it's absolutely right that we do have to demonstrate that. But we are at the stage now where we're really going to see movement and things happening on the ground. And that part at Govan Bridge, I use it as a bit of a metaphor for the city deal. It's like, we're building a bridge, but where is the bridge going? Right, well, it's going to Govan. But what it's actually going to is a bit of Govan that has been underutilised, underdeveloped, again, for decades, but that investment not just of fixing the quay walls, but also of connectivity, which is the next crucial stage, will bring new homes, new businesses, new retail space, new jobs to that part of Govan, to one of the communities in Glasgow which is still significantly disadvantaged and experiences significant levels of deprivation. So that's what the Clyde needs to be. The Clyde needs to be delivering for the people who live closest to it. We, as a city and a city region, will invest to make it fit for that purpose, to make it physically able for that to happen. And we've already demonstrated that when we do that, investment follows, an investment that, as I mentioned before, is focused on what we know we need to do, which is that inclusive growth, jobs which reach the people in our city who most need to have access to high-value, sustainable, fair work in the future.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary?
Yeah, Greg, I want to add to that because I've got, I think, an important point to make, and we're both here together and can make this. I'm about to commit for you together, but I think it's important that this challenge goes both ways. We need to invest in the River Clyde. As it happens, the City Council runs up until that boundary of Govan, then as it happens is my constituency on the south of the river, right down to Port Glasgow, so I'm very well sighted on the issues around the River Clyde. There's a lot of interest in property. Last year at this conference, there was less speculative development. In fact, there was nearly no speculative development in property, particularly around commercial. And one of the things I changed was non-domestic rates to say if you build speculative property, you pay no rates whatsoever until you have the first occupant. That was important, so you're not just building a liability, and I am advised by developers that that's made a difference, and some developments are now happening because of that incentive. We can invest more, City Deal, other infrastructure funds. We can unlock underused and unused land. But here's the thing. A lot of the land's in private ownership, with some landowners waiting for something better or more lucrative to come along. Glasgow does not want to wait any longer. So I think we should be really positive. And by the way, if I have financial products that don't work for you, just as politicians, we say we have policies. If you don't like them, we have others. I say this to you as Finance Secretary. I have financial products to help the private secretary, well, help myself, right, that'd be good. To help the private sector. If you don't like them, I will create others. That's the point of the bank. That's the point of the Building Scotland Fund. That's the point of the support that Scottish Enterprise and other agencies can bring. And we are doing really innovative things right now in unlocking infrastructure development to get the economic growth. So with all that support, notwithstanding the Brexit challenge, but life goes on, the sun will come up, as Graham's pointed out, but notwithstanding that, there's no reason not to go on with the economic growth we need to deliver right now. So here's a challenge back to those who are leaving land in dereliction. If you do that, and if we have business propositions that deliver jobs and economic growth, we'll come for you. We will use the powers we've got to try and make things happen. So be proactive to try and help us deliver that economic growth. And our pledge back is we will help you deliver that economic growth. But equally, we cannot let land sit dormant when people are ready, waiting to invest in this region, this city, and on the banks of the Clyde. I think it's unacceptable.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Let's quickly take a straw poll in the room. If we may, we take a quick straw poll on two questions. Firstly, how many people would like to see a renewed proactive approach to the regeneration of the Clyde? Okay, how many people are against that in the room?
Who would say no to that?
Nobody's against that. Okay, how many people support a more proactive approach to this problem of land banking, of holding back on the development of land? If you're against that, a more proactive approach. Okay, Minister, I think you have 100% support in the room, so let's move forward with that. The next question, Ross, we'd like you to begin on. It concerns the airport. And there's two dimensions to the question. It's really about how can Glasgow Airport keep pace with Edinburgh Airport, which is powering ahead, and how important is the city centre airport rail link in all of that? Please kick us off with that one.
Okay, so the debate to date has seen the airport almost in isolation to the rest of the transport system, and a singular project to link the two together, the airport and the city centre. And what we're struggling with at the Commission is how to see that as part of the future integrated transport system, and to place the airport in its rightful place as the city region's gateway to the world, which was described earlier. And being able to do that in that holistic sense is likely to be where the answer will come from. I'm not going to prejudge what we're going to say in the second report in the spring, but it will be within that broader integrated transport context to ensure that the airport, both inbound and outbound, are maximising the productive use of road space, of rail capacity in the corridor in between. The most congested part of the entire road network across the city region, actually across the country, is the western section of the M8 at peak, and particularly in the morning peak. And so we need to develop a solution which tackles that and tackles the issue about the rising demand for the rail network, and in particular coming into Central Station, and foresee where we land HS2 and build in the capacity for HS2, because it will drive some of the developments which have just been discussed in terms of the place making and the space creation and building. So being able to tie those things together in a holistic piece, rather than seeing the airport and the airport link as one individual project.
That's very helpful. Further comments from anyone on the panel? Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that as chair of the City Region Cabinet, this is something, an issue that has been exercising us for several months now, particularly since the Jacobs analysis report came out, which did really challenge the assumptions around the project that was in the city deal, and particularly in relation to that wider connectivity. If we're not taking advantage of the opportunity to really drive connectivity in the city region with the airport as a hub in that, then are we actually going to deliver the maximum economic value and inclusive economic value from the city deal investment that we have available to us? So I think the work that the Connectivity Commission hasn't given us its conclusions yet on the airport. They're going to come in the new year, but we're doing a lot of work. The two partner councils who oversee that regional project are Glasgow and Renfrewshire. Myself and Councillor Ian Nicholson, the leader of Renfrewshire, and our officers have been doing a lot of work and a lot of thinking. We are in regular discussion with Transport Scotland and with the new Cabinet Secretary with responsibility for transport, Michael Matheson, who I'm meeting actually just the week after next to discuss this very issue about no sense of walking away at all from doing something. We know that connectivity between the airport and the city and the rest of the city region is crucial, and it is a crucial kind of fulcrum for continued development, for continued growth in the west of Scotland. But it has to be right. We have to get it right. We're only going to have the one chance to have this level of investment through the city deal, so we really want to maximise that opportunity. And of course, since the business case for the new airport link came to the city deal, Scottish Government's announced NMIS, the National Manufacturing Institute in Renfrewshire as well. That, a major economic opportunity which we simply can't overlook in our plans for West of Scotland connectivity. So Ross is right, the airport is absolutely crucial. We've got a short space of time, and we're not going to take very much time on this because a lot of work has been done on it. But I think we're very close to developing in partnership the city region, the two city councils that have the lead for the project, the airport itself, Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government, something that will really deliver in terms of connectivity and in terms of future growth for the whole of the west of Scotland.
Thank you very much, Susan. Ross, anything to add?
It was just to re-emphasise that sense of urgency to get something done and in place, but do it in a way which isn't going to be abortive to something else which might follow.
Yes, absolutely. Graham, we're going to come to you if we may. The third most prioritised question concerns participation in the economy, and how do you really help people who are excluded to acquire the skills to participate in the labour market? Obviously, this is close to the Cabinet Secretary's heart as well, so he may wish to comment. But from your analysis, how big an issue is this for the city and the city region? And does your analysis say anything about what really works or helps in this realm?
So you're right. If you look at Scotland and the UK, and in Glasgow, we live in a terribly unequal society, and it shows up in all the various indicators that if you come from particular challenging backgrounds, whether that's socially, whether it's from income basis, geographically as well, then that shapes the economic outcomes that you're more likely to go on to receive. I think the very first thing we need to think about and always remember that ultimately through economic opportunity comes through economic growth, and we need to get our economy moving at a faster rate than it has done over the last few years. And so if you look at the 10 years in the run-up to the financial crisis, on a per head basis our economy was growing by about 2% a year. If you look at the 10 years since the financial crisis, we've grown by 2% in total. So that's not per year, that's in total in comparison to what we were growing on an annual basis and up to that. And that just shows you just the scale of the challenge we've had over the last 10 years. And the first thing you can do to try and improve economic opportunity for people is to actually get the economy growing. And that's about competitiveness, that's about business investment, that's about supporting the growth and the job creators in our economy. And then to the specific question about tackling inequality and about tackling the barriers that people have into meaningful employment. I mean, all the evidence points to the more that you can do at the earlier stage of people's development. So the more you can invest in young people at the earliest stage possible, then the bigger bang you'll get in terms of better economic outcomes in the long run. That's really hard to do though, because it means making a long-term play, a long-term investment in the next generation. And waiting for that to benefit through time. And also, we spend a lot of our time thinking about skills and education, etc. But a lot, again, of the evidence point to the stuff that happens outside that. So it's what are the opportunities that young people have, or people who are detached from the labour market have outside the traditional skills system, the traditional education system. So what mentoring do they have? What adult leadership do they have to give them support and insights into where they can fulfil their potential?
Thank you very much indeed. Very helpful to hear what the evidence says. Cabinet Secretary.
I absolutely follow the evidence, and I hate to use a Trumpism as well, right? But I am the evidence. I think he said that one time. I tell you why I say that, not because Trump said it. I'm one of the lucky ones from the street that I was brought up in. Some of the life stories you just couldn't believe in. I feel really lucky that I had an opportunity in life. By the way, it wasn't a social programme that got me anywhere. It was a deprived scheme, a deprived street. I was one of the lucky ones. I found a political party, I found something I loved, and I'm now doing the dream job. And for me, that's what I'm trying to do now, deliver jobs. It's as simple as that. See all the social programmes in the world, they're necessary. And Graham's absolutely right. The evidence says that a tough start in life, not chaotic lifestyles, unemployment, intergenerational poverty, poor housing, all of that matters. It really does. And that's why investment in early years, childcare, health, environment, transport, all of that matters. Education matters. But for me, the single ingredient, the best social policy we can deliver is employment. Give people a job. It gives them a reason to get up in the morning, go to work, feel included, feel part of society. And it's transformational. So that's why economic growth is so important to me. And in building that growth, we make sure we all benefit from it. That's not government's job, by the way. Any employer can choose to go that extra mile and employ that young person that was in social care because of no fault of their own. Any company can go and employ someone from the disadvantaged areas. Any company can choose to go the extra mile on those with disabilities. Or even people with offences. It's not necessarily popular. But actually 1 in 3 men in this room have an offence. It's probably a traffic offence, I hope. But, well, you get what I mean there. I don't hope you've got a traffic offence. But my point is this, if we rule people out because they've only had one chance in life, then you've just written off 1/3 of all males in Scotland, 1 in 8 women, which is an interesting gender statistic about how the difference between male and females break traffic laws. So my point is this, economic growth, meaningful employment, And it's not just the government's job. Private companies can do, and do this. I touched on Barclays. If even the financial services sector, and I didn't mean that the way that it came out there, but if the bankers of our country can reach out and say, actually, aptitude matters more than your academic qualifications, then that's very powerful. And what they now tell me is those financial institutions, I see those young people we've taken from the tougher backgrounds, they're giving us pretty good outcomes. They're staying longer and they're giving us something back. So actually, there's an economic benefit by doing the right thing as well as a social imperative. And if we don't do it as a country, you pay for the failure, we pay for the failure. So let's do the right thing and deliver our social values as well as the economic growth.
You can see a lot of support for your remarks, Cabinet Secretary, in the room. Janice, in Susan's remarks, she talked about the importance of repopulating the city centre, and one of the questions that's come through from the delegates has been highly prioritised, is about, what kind of place does the city centre need to be? How do we create the environment in which people want to live in the city centre, can afford to live in the city centre, can enjoy that? What are your reflections on that?
The city centre is important, not just for the residents, the businesses and the visitors, but for the whole of Scotland. I mean, the Hielanman's umbrella just around the corner was called that because the city was a magnet for people throughout the rural hinterland and the whole west of Scotland. And we raise a lot of expectations about what you'll find when you get here. And I think it's really important that the expectations that we raise through engaging with our stakeholders, with the visitor economy, are actually delivered in reality. And this is quite difficult because we have a big retail centre. Retail is very challenged at the moment. So what can creative industries bring to retail to deliver an experience in the city centre that will attract people to it? I think also the density is really important. City centres are about people. They're about density. I want to hear kids playing, I want schools, I want people who are coming here to find a job, to find a school nearby that they can educate their child at. It seems to me that the city centre is devoid of schools. I think also there are questions about the quality of the built environment. I'm not going to talk too much about transport because Ross has talked quite a lot about that already. The quality of the built environment is really important. People are always surprised when they come here and they find a handsome city with a gridiron North American street structure. And I think we have to be really careful about the quality of what we build, how we procure our buildings, and also how we support our incredible architectural and design talent to have the opportunity to build in their own place. All too often they build elsewhere, and we're very good at giving some of the world's best, Zaha Hadid and whoever, the opportunity to build here. So we're a city that has to be really clear about recognising talent, recognising quality, and being really good at scrutinising who we invite to build here, where they can build, how they can build, and what the benefits of the building are, because it's about creating apprenticeships, it's about building for the long term. You should be building for future generations, not just to make a quick buck or not just to fill a gap. Maybe there are places in the city that are more speculative, but we have to be really clear about what they are. I think also we have to be very clear about not creating ghettos. And for me, words beget actions. And I do worry about creating silos for innovation, silos for the arts, and silos for finance. Because in the future, the new businesses are going to come from the collisions between these things. So it's really important where we can that we build permeability into our buildings, especially our public buildings, our universities, our council estate. We want people from all areas of the city to come and to benefit from these. If they can sit down, have a cup of coffee, meet somebody, just be in some of those places that they feel are excluded, they're excluded from, then we'll have different conversations. When you bring people together, you do business. And there's also another hidden dimension in Glasgow city centre, which is brought about by this fourth industrial revolution, which is digital. How can we use augmented reality to create different cities within our cities, almost like these invisible cities? We need to curate our city centres. Like, how can we unlock all of those treasures that we have? Glasgow is a city that is embarrassingly rich in assets, in its built environment, in its museum collections, in its historic stories, in the things behind closed doors. How can we use digital to bring them to light so that people who visit here get not just a real tangible experience through the world that they can touch and see, but also through their devices? I think there's a big trick we can play.
Great, thank you very much. Ross?
So we just pick up on that aspect about that invitation to look up in Glasgow and to appreciate the built environment. At the moment, if you look up, you get run down. You know, we need to create attractive, accessible, available space and place for people in the city. And the Connectivity Commission, one of the recommendations in this first report is to take that grid network, which has been managed for car use and delivery van, etc., and to turn that into an active grid space as being promoted by Austin Smith Lord in their strategic development frameworks, and hand over those places to people, you know, and really allow people to make Glasgow in that sense.
So just one other thing that I wanted to say is Glasgow's aiming to be the UK's first circular economy city, which is another aspect of our city that, you know, it's very Brexit ready. You know, we have to help ourselves. You know, we're going to, the future solutions and opportunities for Glasgow are going to be created by us, not for us. And I think the circular economy gives everyone in the city, every business in the city, the right to make new connections, new collaborations, and to put their ideas forward. It's us that are going to solve our problems using our city, no one else.
And it was extraordinary to hear Susan tell us that Glasgow is in the final of the World Economic Forum Awards alongside the European Commission, the Netherlands, Denmark. Toronto and the Chinese province. So that's an amazing achievement. So well done to everyone involved in that. Let's move this along. Cabinet Secretary, there's a question about the digital realm and whether there's a digital divide, whether digital inclusion is becoming a challenge, whether anything is really being done to make sure that people who can have access to digital connectivity and use that for economic participation. Is that a thought that's close to your heart?
Well, it is. I mean, there's a number of things. I didn't see the question, but there's a number of things we'll need to do around infrastructure, so that's super fast broadband. But actually, I think Glasgow's ahead of the curve on mobile connectivity naturally because of the concentration of people. But on digital, it can be that real hotspot as well. So the digital strategy's right. People will come to the city for a whole host of reasons, but see if you've got the best digital access, that's another reason to come into the city and then share it. In terms of for future economy, I agree with the points around innovation and digital opportunities for a whole host of sectors. Frankly, too many companies are not thinking about the digital opportunities, so we've got financial support to do that and other products. But for citizens' participation, there is support, and actually that's why things like access to public services are really important. There's an exclusion and inclusion issue, and there's an age issue as well in terms of profiles. So there's more we're doing around education, access to digital opportunity, support for companies as well. And actually cyber security is an issue, because if people lose confidence in digital, and that can happen, look at what's happened at some mobile operators in the last couple of days, or banks. There's an issue about cyber security and public trust and confidence in digital as well. So that's why we need to invest in cyber security and ensuring that everyone's got an opportunity to access that digital future. But they really do have, most people have well, certainly younger people, I'm told, have a smartphone. So there is something about how people are accessing information and communicating, and we need to ensure that we're proofing it so that we're not excluding people, but there is no doubt about it that we need more investment in it, and skills and work readiness is really important as well. There's no point not having people coming out of educational institutions not work ready and not having the relevant skills on digital, because it's so central to our future.
Great. Cabinet Secretary, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the way you're prioritising the questions. It's really helping us. Keep voting if you will. Next round of questions. Susan, there's a question about drug dependence and homelessness in the city centre. Graham, there's more questions coming about the impact of Brexit, particularly on small firms and trade. Janice, a question about what's the real USP of Glasgow? What's it actually really good at? And then a whole series of others. So we'll keep going with those. We've got another 20 minutes or so, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. So, Susan, could you pick up on this question of drug dependence and homelessness, how that affects your city centre strategy and what needs to be done?
Yeah, and it's one of the most difficult issues we face as a city council, how we support the most vulnerable people in our city, while at the same time recognising that the impact of visible rough sleeping, of begging, of drug taking is an economic barrier, particularly when it takes place in our city centre. I think there's a few things I would say. You know, we touched earlier on, the speakers have touched on the legacy that we have inherited in Glasgow, that legacy of kind of post-industrial decline for many, many years, and the social damage that wrought. And addiction was one of the biggest symptoms of that social damage, and it lives with us today. It's a blight still on far too many of our communities, and it is one of the biggest drivers behind homelessness and rough sleeping. I want to be clear that homelessness, rough sleeping, begging are not the same thing. There are overlaps in that Venn diagram, but it is extraordinarily complex, and they need to be approached in different ways. We are seeing that exacerbated, and I'll be absolutely clear about this, by UK government policies on social security and welfare, particularly benefit sanctions. And although universal credit is has only just now been rolled out in Glasgow in the past couple of months, I have serious concerns about the impact of universal credit. So we do have a rough sleeping issue, we have a begging issue in the city centre. I would say, however, that while I would say it's something that every big city has to deal with, I do not say that to imply that it's something that we should just tolerate and say, oh, well, you know, that's what cities have. And our approach in Glasgow is absolutely the opposite to that. But I'll say a wee bit more about that in a second, but just to give one comparator, Manchester right now, which is probably our closest comparator city within the UK, has an incredible rough sleeping problem. I was reading something about it just the other day. Manchester regularly is dealing with around 500 rough sleepers on its streets in any given evening. In Glasgow, our regular rough sleeping population is about a tenth of that. Although we are a slightly bigger city than Manchester, only just slightly. So this is not to downplay the seriousness of the issue within our own context, but compared to similar cities, we do very well on homelessness and rough sleeping, and that's in a large part due to policies that the Scottish Government's brought in, and the progressive policies around homelessness that we have in Scotland. But we know that in Glasgow we have to change, we have to take a real step forward in order to address our homelessness and rough sleeping problem. So we're really completely changed our approach over the past year. And my colleague Mary Hunter, who is the city convener for health and social care, has led on an alliancing approach, partnership working between the City Council, our public sector partners in healthcare, but also our third sector partners, the Simon community, the Glasgow City Mission, Shelter, partners like the Govan Law Centre as well, to make sure that we have, and I think it's, you know, we still have a way to go, but we now, I believe, have the best service that we've ever had for rough sleepers in the city. We get that service to people as quickly as we can, and it's not just a service, it is a suite of wraparound services which we try and make as bespoke as possible for those individuals. And the other side of our approach is a move as rapidly as we can to housing first. So the traditional way of dealing with people with addictions who are sleeping on the street has been to try and help them through their addiction, support them through recovery, and then get them a house. And that obviously prolongs their period of homelessness. We're completely turning that on its head, and we're doing it in partnership with Social Bite, who I'm sure many of you will be aware of, a social enterprise who have done phenomenal things here and elsewhere, increasingly across the UK. We're turning that on its head. It's now get somebody into a house and then put the bespoke services and support around them that suit their needs, and help them through recovery, help them to sustain their tenancy in that house. It works better for them as an individual, and it works better for the city as well, and it works better for the businesses and the residents who have a right to want to use and trade in the city centre and feel safe and feel that the city centre is family friendly and a place where they can take their kids and take their families. So we're implementing some quite radical new policy approaches to address this, but the focus is most of all on remembering that we are dealing with people with extremely complex vulnerabilities in the city, some of the most disadvantaged individuals in our city, and we can't lose sight of that. On the other side of it, we do have, again, as big cities do, we have a begging issue, and although there is correlation and an overlap between rough sleeping and begging, it is not entirely overlapping, and we know that there is a very small, not a huge amount, but there is some begging in the city which is not related to homelessness, and is not always organised begging, but is begging by choice. Now, again, that doesn't mean that the person isn't vulnerable. That doesn't mean that the person, although they may have a tenancy, it doesn't mean that they don't still require support in their lives. You know, people don't end up spending their days on the streets by and large for no reason if they don't have issues in their lives that put them there. So we have put together a begging working group. It's a subgroup of our long-standing city centre strategy board, and they have come up again with some really quite radical forward-looking proposals to try and support people who are begging on the city centre out of that, to get them off of the streets, into either shelter, preferably accommodation, find alternative ways for them to support themselves, find alternative ways of giving. Part of the reason this happens is because Glaswegians are very generous, so we're exploring alternative giving, for example, in the city centre. That's something that's in its early stages. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is it is complex. There's no one policy approach or one solution that's going to sort out rough sleeping and begging and addiction. There are a suite of policies and a suite of different approaches which do require a partnership approach, which do require remembering the complexities and often the tragic life stories that are at the heart of this issue, but not forgetting as well that we cannot ignore it. We cannot simply say this is just something that happens in cities. So, you know, people have to walk past rough sleepers in any other city. Why should they not do it in Glasgow? That is not the approach we want to take. But we do understand that this is it's not overnight, and it is a complex approach for a complex problem. But we are working on some quite radical policy solutions, which I hope will see the fruits of, not just over the coming years, but this year. We will start to see a difference on the city streets.
Thank you very much, Council Leader. A really challenging issue and a very thoughtful response. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to ask the panel for their blessing, and we'll try to go through about 7 questions quite quickly. So in a minute, Cabinet Secretary, we're coming to you on climate change, if we may. Shortly, Graham, we're coming to you on the desirability or not of a tourism levy, and what's going to be the impact on SMEs and startups of Brexit. And Ross will be coming to you on the question of young people and vocational skills, and is that an important alternative or a choice to university. But first, Janice, if we may, 2 questions for you. What should Glasgow really be famous for? What's the USP that we should build around? And what are the sort of 3 priorities to really address creative industries? We know it's your specialist subject, but you might have to be very quick if you don't mind.
Okay, Glasgow's USP, again, it says it in the tin, that people make Glasgow. They're our greatest natural resource and our richest natural asset, or at least their grey matter is. and their ability to have brilliant ideas that can become businesses or enhance our lives in some way. And how do we make their ideas brilliant? Through education. Education is the big leveler. It's the thing that raised me from a background where no one in my family had ever been to higher or further education, and allowed me to have a business and a really good life in this really great place. Education is key in unlocking the potential of people to have creative ideas and to behave entrepreneurially. So what do I think is important in terms of USPs? I think Glasgow's story, its incredible story about its creativity, its entrepreneurialism, and its ability to design, I think they are defining for the city. We have the oldest creative industries sector in the world. The Fowlis brothers created the first Academy of Design in the world in 1753. It was created to transform the fruits of the first industrial revolution into products that people would want to buy. We are now in the fourth industrial revolution, and we really need to be, doing the same thing again. Just very quickly, the School of Art in Glasgow is ranked 16th in the world, the entire world. The Conservatoire is 5th in the world. The University of Glasgow is 65th in the world. We need to change the narrative. We need to really focus where our strengths are.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Graham, if we may, we'd like to come to you. One of the questions is, would a tourism levy be a good idea for the city as a way of raising revenue? And the second one is, given the analysis you've done, is there a particular thing that SMEs and startups should be, is there a particular way they'll be impacted by Brexit that they need to be ready for?
Great, so I get the nice easy questions. I think, so the tourism levy, there's obviously an argument for and against. I think the principle about doing it needs to be thought through very carefully and the potential knock-on effects to the economy. But I think it gets to the heart of a much wider question, which is what are the economic powers open to local government to do? So you may disagree or agree with the tourist tax, you may think about a congestion charge or anything else. But what are the economic powers? What economic powers should local government have? And also, how do you fund local government? And local government funding in Scotland is a mess.
Wait a minute, I need to come back.
Local government has very little discretion. A straw poll, does anyone understand how it's funded? One, two.
He's a director of finance.
What tools and economic opportunities do you want local government to have? And I think if the tourism levy or the tourism tax, whatever you want to call it, does start to unlock a debate about where should power lie and what can you genuinely use at a local level to promote economic growth and development, I think it's a good thing that we start to have that conversation. And the wider point about Brexit, I think that simple diagram that we have up there about the key areas where Brexit will impact through on companies, I think is the most important thing to work through. And I think one of the things that we find when we speak to businesses is that they say it's just so complex or so uncertain they don't bother. But actually, a small amount of effort to think through, where are your main supply chains? Who are you selling to? Are they likely to be exposed to any change with Brexit? And if not, fine. And one of the things we do need to remember is that trade with Europe is a relatively small part of our overall economy, so it will have a shock. But you've got to think about where the opportunities are and what's happening domestically as well. So I think that simple diagram, thinking through about where you might be influencing that and reassuring yourself that you have in place contingencies or you can be reasonably confident it will not have an impact, I think will be the key thing to do.
Can I just add to that? Just the Brexit preparedness point, because the politics are in a different place and obviously we can only leave it to those in the House of Commons that will make that decision, although we're trying to apply appropriate pressure. Although there'll be a really interesting court judgment shortly if Brexit can just arbitrarily be cancelled, frankly, if Article 50 can just be revoked. And the current advice is leading to a legal opinion that suggests, yes, it can. And therefore, that might change the whole nature of the debate next week. Actually, at this event last year, you asked me if I was David Davis, the then Brexit Secretary, what I would do. And I gave you the answer, one word, resign. Yeah. And he did it. So I have a 100% record in calling it right so far. And I know that business wouldn't want perpetual uncertainty and that perpetual transition that may well be an outcome. You know the Scottish Government's position. We've made it clear, EU membership, if it's not that single market customs union. But the Prime Minister is not a master of her own destiny. That much is clear. She is a resilient woman, but she is not a master of her own destiny. So next week, on the Tuesday, if the vote goes ahead, we will probably have no greater sense of what you are preparing for yet. So we've still got time to go on this. In any event, the advice that Graham's given you is right about preparedness. We've produced a Brexit preparedness toolkit because we recognise that SMEs are just, treading water to stay afloat, to keep businesses going, and might not have thought about the consequences. So there is some basic advice out there what to look for. But to give you further reassurance, both within government, within the banks, because the banks will touch more companies, and accountancy agencies will touch more companies than our enterprise agency ever would. So there is actually preparation underway right now, even in the event of worst, to maintain economic confidence in the event of a shock. Because a calamitous no-deal Brexit would be a shock. A deal Brexit is financial or economic growth foregone. A shock, it presents the recession threat, and that's why ensuring there's as much financial support, signposting, security as possible will be significant. And I've got a new banking and economic policy forum, so I work directly with the banks to make sure there'll be adequate support there in the event of the worst case scenario, but hopefully that can be averted. I just wanted to make that point, because we're not sitting in a darkened room waiting for something to happen. We're preparing for it, but we hope to avert it.
Great, thank you very much indeed, and congratulations again on your foresight with predicting that David Davis should resign.
About 10 months before he actually did.
Yeah, he sowed the seed. Ross, about 40 people in the room have said they want to comment on the question, should our young people be thinking much more about highly applied vocational education as a route into the labour market, rather than thinking higher education is always the best route?
Okay, so I'll declare an interest as the chair of Forth Valley College. Yeah. And if you take the substance of Susan's speech was about collaboration. Derek mentioned the emergence of the regional economic partnerships and bringing public and private sector together. Janice rightly mentioned the issue about education at the heart of everything, and Graham was talking about where power should lie. When you take all of them together, you're really describing inclusive growth, and a key part of that is having the right learner journey for the right young individual or old individual returning to education. So being able to have that duality of pathway between academic and vocational and switch between the two, and having colleges, the other institutions, the universities collaborating with each other and collaborating on the education employment interface and enlivening that interface and making it much more possible to switch between employment and education, that's where the real progress will come, and that's where productivity will be driven from.
Thank you very much indeed. Two more questions then. Cabinet Secretary first. The question that we've put, 40 people have voted for this. We have only 12 years to avert dangerous climate change. How do we accelerate the efforts to decarbonise and climate-proof our economy?
So Scotland has now internationally recognised amongst the most challenging but ambitious climate change targets in the world, and legally binding. And the actions that flow from that mean we need to change our behaviours. So our economy genuinely has to be low carbon. We have to do things like decarbonise transport. We're doing it. The rail network's an example of that. Electric vehicles, how we use plastics, how we use energy more efficient, reduce, reuse, all of that. So we need to change our personal behaviours and change our economy towards that low carbon transition. We don't have a choice, we just need to get on with it. But do it in a way that you have public support with us and they understand why we're doing what we're doing. But there's absolute consensus we need to do this. That's as short an answer as I can give.
Thank you very much indeed. Susan, the last question, if we may. Several people have asked the question, how do we out Philadelphia, Philadelphia? Or how can we out Edinburgh, Edinburgh? But the most popular version of the question, with 28 votes, is how can we out Manchester, Manchester? So what is it that Glasgow needs to do to take that bold self-confidence that seems to have been so important in the Manchester story?
Well, I think that's what I tried to touch on in my speech, is that we've started, in fact, not just started, we've made enormous strides in putting together the kind of coalition of interests across the public and private sector, which has worked very well for Manchester, to make the case for the city. We are investing in understanding more what our challenges are, understanding what our case is, what our story is, what Glasgow's narrative about business and our economy is, and then getting out there and telling that story as much as possible. As a city council, we've invested in those core functions within the city. Derek touched on it as well. We've invested in planning, we've invested in economic development, in building control, in functions like urban design. We had a major recruitment drive earlier this year following the creation of a fund that we called Invest to Improve in our budget in February, which was focused on those services which had lost a lot of experience and skill over the years in the council and hadn't really been invested in for a long time. As Derek said, it's not always an easy argument to make to the public. I'm not sure you'd put on a leaflet necessarily, you know, oh, we recruited lots of new planners. I don't know how many votes that will win us at election time, but we did it because because of our commitment to inclusive economic growth. We know absolutely that these are the key professionals that we need in our officer corps in the right numbers to deliver for businesses, for investors at pace in the city, to deliver for them what they need, but within the context always of what we need as well. And I suppose that takes me back to my kind of closing remarks in my speech. There are some parts of things about Manchester's economic growth and Manchester's rapid development that I don't want to out-Manchester them on. And Manchester is experiencing, for example, regenerated neighbourhoods that local young people are being priced out of. They're not building social housing on the scale that we are at all. They are experiencing issues around homelessness, for example, which we are not yet, and I don't believe will, because we've put work in place to prevent that happening, that we won't experience in Glasgow. So there are always cautionary tales around any economic miracle. Manchester is a great city, it's achieved great things, but I would point to just this week, I caught up with colleagues in New Gorbals Housing Association and the development that they're involved in and have been for 30 years in absolutely transforming the Gorbals, which I don't need to tell any of you was once a notorious word throughout the UK. It's absolutely remarkable, and it is a model, and a model that's being replicated elsewhere across the city, which we'll replicate in Sighthill as well, of how we do this right, how we don't fall into that trap of traditional communities actually being pushed out of a neighbourhood that becomes suddenly trendy, suddenly popular because regeneration's gone into it. And the quality of housing that's being built in Lauriston, just on the south side of the river, it be our south bank. It might as well be the city centre. It's a 10-minute walk from here. The quality of the housing that's being built there is fantastic. It's winning architectural awards. It's Page and Park architects, so to Janice's point about work for local architects. But what is absolutely crucial there is that you will not be able to tell, looking at those houses, which are social rented and which are houses for sale. You will have no idea, because the quality and standard of that housing is exactly the same, and it's been driven, that quality and standard has been driven by a community-led housing association in the Gorbals, by our social rented sector. The houses, the for sale houses, are selling like hotcakes before they're even built. They're selling off plan. So don't let anybody tell you that insisting on a proper mixed community that remains affordable, remains accessible for local communities, local people, as well as for the folk that we want to, all those hipsters that we want to keep coming to Glasgow. Don't let anybody tell you that a mixed community like that puts buyers off, puts owners off, living next to a social social renter puts owners off. Somewhere like the Gorbals, Sighthill will be the same. Anderston, where there's fantastic developments right on the edge of Finnieston. They are living proof that that commitment to retaining affordability alongside regeneration can work. And so I don't want to out Manchester, I just want to always be a better Glasgow.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Important times call for serious debates, as you've heard, and they also call for leadership resolve, and you've heard a lot of that from the platform this morning. I want to ask you to join me in thanking Professors Graham Roy and Janice Kirkpatrick, Ross Martin, our guest of honour, Cabinet Secretary Derek Mackay, and our host, the leader of the City of Glasgow, Councillor Susan Aitken. Thank you very much indeed.